So I'm always the person that gets asked all the time, where are you really from? Because I can hear from my accent that's not British, but they can't work out from what I look like where I'm really from. They're always shocked when I say I'm from Africa. So I'm from Namibia. I was born and raised in Namibia. As a child, I don't remember my childhood being solemn or sad. I just remember it as an amazing time. My parents and my grandparents on both sides, I feel, have shaped my life to who I am. Because growing up in Southern Africa, they were children of the apartheid era, which was a very difficult time. So they grew up very poor with my grandmother that really supported a family of 12 children.
My mum came to England before I was born from Germany, and she met my father. So I came along. My father went back to Ghana. My mum didn't know, but he had a wife and children in Ghana. So she ended up in Streatham in the mother and baby's home. I always get emotional when I talk about this. All the other mothers had their children adopted, all of them. So thankfully, she was made of strong stuff. A friend of hers told her about a vacancy for a cook in a children's village called Pestalozzi that was in Sussex, in East Sussex. So she went along with a 2-year-old and got the job.
My conception was in Nigeria. I was born in Britain. My parents were from India. I inherited their genetic lineage. They had been from a lineage that had been British subjects for 110 years by the time I was born. So they were also British, and then I lived in Nigeria until I was 6 years old. And so where am I from? How would I say to the person, you tell me?
My name is Abha. I work at Diversity Resource International. I'm one of the project and services coordinators here. I have lived most of my life in a southern state of India called Tamil Nadu. My hometown is called Tirupur, and I was born in a different city, which is in Bangalore, which is a cosmopolitan city in another South Indian state called Karnataka. And I mean, whenever people ask me where I'm from, it takes me a while to explain to them because I never really feel like I belong to a certain place. To be honest, the city I come from is small. Like I always say, it's small. Even though people, when they ask me how many people live there, it's more than 10 million. But it is a small city.
Before coming to the UK, I was a reporter at one of our national newspapers called The Chronicle. And in the beginning, I was just covering general news stories, but I was much more drawn to doing feature articles for the Sunday paper. My writing career, you could say, started then.
I was writing poetry in the sixth form at my Jesuit college, run mainly by Jesuit priests. The colonial system didn't leave an infrastructure of creative outlets. No grand opera house, no grand theater, no publishing house, because the colonies were seen as providers of raw material. In the case of Guyana, bauxite, sugar, timber, molasses. So both myself and Grace, as budding writers, with a dream of being a professionally published writer.
A few years later, I was working on my first novel, All of a Morning Sky, in Guyana. So you could say my writing career, started then, but there was no publishing houses in Guyana.
With a bit of luck, you get published, and then you get something called royalties. That isn't going to happen in the Caribbean.
We both thought, both wanted to be professional writers. So we both came to England to develop ourselves as writers.
My name is Maya Rizk. I'm from Syria. I'm 29 years old. And I'm here from 3 years. Let me say 3 years ago, I live in the UK, in East Sussex especially. I grew up in Syria, and when I was there was a war. I'm coming from war background, so it was 8 years, this journey of my life in my teenagers till I going to school, so I was under the war all the time. Then I moved to here. I was studying there. I did 2 universities. One of them Faculty of Fine Art, and the other it was acting and theater. When I arrived to here, first things, it was the language. For me, it was not easy because I don't speak any English word before. So when I came to here, I was just want to buy something from the market or whatever. I would think going to Google Translate, try to hear, going to the person, try to speak, then I feel shy. I open the Google Translate, show him I want this. So it was very hard,
My name is Dawit Ghebreyesus, and I come from East Africa, Eritrea, born in a city called Asmara, which is a very beautiful city, very eclectic. Grew up with looking at different kind of people, all Jewish, Italians, British, Americans, all kind of Arabs, Yemenis, and culturally is very diverse. All kind of people around, including Eritreans with 9 ethnic groups. Then I moved to Sweden in beginning of 90, which is 89, end of 89. So I have been in Sweden to came here to England to study. So I am a documentary filmmaker now. Growing up in Asmara, I grew up watching cinemas and American films, also including Italian, European movies. They usually cost us a lot of money to go to cinema. So that is, not everybody have access to go to the cinema and watch films. So people would say, tell us how it was. And then you tell the whole film in front of everybody. So you add up your things. Obviously, you can't remember everything. So this is how I learned storytelling technique in the beginning. That's what I say.
I am from Eritrea, and I came to study as an international student in 1992, and I finished my first degree at South Bank University. And then I met my ex-husband, father of my 2 children, and I stayed here.
My parents from the Punjab, North India. They got married and
Moved to Kenya before we came to this country from Kenya. My mum and dad, between them, worked different jobs to make sure that we had, one, the money, 2, the money to send my dad as a overseas student to Swansea University to re-qualify all the things he'd already done. So he did it in an accelerated 2 years, re-qualified, and brought all of us over. So for me, home
my first home is Africa.
My name is Amanda Silva. I come from Venezuela. I was born in Venezuela and raised in Venezuela. I moved there when I was 15 years old. So I grew up in a city called Mérida, which is a city surrounded by mountains completely. I grew up with my 3 siblings, my parents. I think my family had like very different ways of raising me and my siblings to others, within our culture, because we didn't believe in any religion. So Venezuela, it's a Catholic country. I think a big amount of population were Catholic, and all my friends were Catholic. And then my parents were not. So I think that was like the first difference growing up, that everyone would know things that I didn't know.
I was born in Somalia, then my family moved to the Netherlands. We lived there for 10 years, and then we moved to the UK. My family moved to Europe as refugees because of the civil war in Somalia. And I've always been aware of kind of the situation back home and how privileged we were in a sense to be able to move to Europe and have access to all of these opportunities and things like that.
So I'm Aaron. I am half Eritrean, half English. Well, actually half Eritrean, core German, core English. I know I may not look it, but I am half Eritrean, and Eritrea is a small little country in East Africa. I would say Sussex is my home. Lived there almost all my life, really, mainly in Lewis, but I now live in Brighton. Generally speaking, I've had a very middle-class upbringing, but there's been a sort of funny, interesting Eritrean twist in all of it, really. So my mother's Eritrean, my dad is, I believe he's half English, half German, but I don't know, I can't remember if it's slightly more English and slightly less German, it might be that.
I find it very hard to live in that place unless I form some sense of connection to the earth, the landscape, the nature, and the people. And when I see a scene like that, there's something that grounds me, that really puts me at peace and heals.
Nature is very, very generous here. And generally people are quite easygoing. That's what brought me down here. Because to live exactly as I would want, for example, for Anuja and I to live together, to have a child, to bring him up here, there's a lot of places in the country where that wouldn't be so easy. Really, Brighton and Lewis is a much easier place to have that slightly alternative way of life.
I think there's a sense of peace that comes to living here because it's so, like in Lewis particularly, it's very quiet and it's kind of secluded from all of the noise you'll get in like bigger cities. But I guess because it's still, I've been here for a couple of months now, so, and it still doesn't quite feel like home. But then I think for me, the UK will never really feel like home. Like I think my heart is in Somalia, really.
For the people who arrive to here, first they arrive, they have no idea about what is going on. So this is one of the things happened to me. I was looking for the work and I was just asked for, because they don't let you to start work if you have no experience, let me say. So you will start with anything. Just I want job. So one person, I start to work with him in the small restaurant. He was just, because I'm new and he know I really need this work, he not pay me very well. He just, how to say, he was lying about the money I have to take per hours. I have no idea about the minimum wage, what I have to ask. I have no idea about anything. And he started to pay me nothing, literally nothing. And just he let me to say to come, like I walk very long way from my home till the place. And he let me to do the work, not what I'm coming to work for. I mean, he started to ask me about things as he wants, because he said, I accept everything. So he started to use me, and yeah, it was hard. Like, I would like to make everything clear for the people who came first. They know what they deserve, and how can they be in the safe side about these people.
I honestly didn't know anything about Sussex before I came here. So I just came because I liked the university, I liked the degree. So I was just like, okay, I'll go to this university. I didn't even hear of Brighton. I didn't know it was a city which was supposed to be famous. So coming here, looking at just the downs and how beautiful they are, it's been great to like experience it, take it in slowly. And for me, so I identify as queer, so I am bisexual. So to be open about your identity is also a big thing for me. And living in Brighton, that has been a big advantage because it has a flourishing community of people from different sexualities, and it doesn't feel you don't have to always think about if when you're talking to somebody, and you don't have to feel threatened about your identity in terms of if you mention that you're queer, you might be judged for it.
My husband is from East Sussex. We ended up in his home place. We've got 2 daughters, and this is where I bring my children up. When I had my daughters, it became more important for me to have identity and culture, and to make a distinction between my culture and identity and my husband's culture and identity.
When I came to England, I have to say, probably I still remember it as a very traumatic time, because with all of that colour and syncretism and different flavours and celebrate, I came here and it felt like going from a colour movie into a black and white movie. Everything here felt very cold. People, it's a very unchild-friendly society where children learn to be afraid of strangers.
The Caribbean is a very looking out society. I suppose that struck me, and I missed that when I first came. When I say looking out, you're walking down the street, and the way the houses are made architecturally, you have a veranda and these push-out windows. But in England, the houses have a sort of a rectangular, mathematical repetitiveness. And because of the nature of the architecture, the windows are closed, curtains are put. But in the Caribbean, come evening time, out come the fireflies, it's sunset. You might have a hammock on your veranda. You might have what they call a Borbeach chair, your grandmother cracking some parch nuts. You're doing nothing, as they say, you're liming. You're just sitting there, and somebody pauses. What's going on?
Currently, I am based in Crawley, which I feel is a very diverse town when it comes to ethnicity and even when it comes to religion. I feel a bit more comfortable going out here and just expressing myself as I want to express myself, just because I don't have that pressure that I had back in my home country.
When you come from a third world country like Namibia into a first world country, it feels like you skipped 10 steps. You know, you've gone from something that's really outdated and old, and all of a sudden you're in a new world where you're treated completely. For me, I felt completely equally treated in England, even though maybe for someone who's grown up in England, they don't see that big progress.
My parents have brought a kind of a generational history of interacting with British superiority, as well as the distinct syncretic cultural traditions of India. So my 3 parents are incredibly different. They are ethnically, linguistically, and religiously very diverse, just those 3 people.
But coming from a country where
you know, there isn't equality. You're going into schools which are black schools and not white schools, and there's an expectation as well of which is accepted, which you don't understand really what it means until you come away from that, and then you realize it's not supposed to be like that, and that's the big gap I'm talking about. And so then you, when you look back and you look at your history, you then realize that there is actually progress. There's big progress.
Growing up as a woman, I feel Latin America can be. I feel we you know, we've seen some progress, but I feel it can still be very sexist, the culture. So I didn't feel very safe going out on my own. Or going out on my own at certain times of the day, just because of the fact that I was a girl, and that every time I went out, I did had men calling on me, and as I mentioned, I moved out when I was 15. So all these experiences were when I was less than 15 years old. So I do feel a bit more safe in the UK and in Crawley.
Subjugation to the British has completely changed India from perhaps the richest country in the world, or certainly one of the richest, having 25% of the world's GDP, into one of the poorest. Within 200 years, the wealth and the vigor of the Indian economy, culture and polity was stripped by the British and shamelessly looted and shamelessly vandalized.
We see a lot of more inequalities where a lot of people, especially in the rural areas, aren't accessing education, and it's almost like the country, in a lot of African countries, have had to start from scratch, and there's obviously some Western influence there with the US and the way that they control maybe some of the financial situations and maybe influence some of the political decisions that happen there.
And I enjoy a lot of chats, a lot of discussions with my British friends. What struck me is how little they know about the other cultures, and forget language, but the other cultures.
Religious differences were actively encouraged by the British to cause the divide and rule policy. It was a completely deliberate policy that was implemented after the 1857. The result of that, we're still living with the trauma of today and the trauma of partition.
I actually love the solemnness and the quietness in England, and I had to learn in England that people don't really care how you feel. When they ask you, how are you? They just want you to say, I'm fine. They don't want your life story, which is not something that you have in Namibia. And when people ask you, how are you? They really want to catch up with when they last saw you.
The social life in Syria, it's very different. I prefer what we was there because the people there are very social and very close. The family, the relative, the friend, we always meet, we always keep in touch. Every day maybe you will sit with your neighborhood in the building. We had a dinner together, just everyone, they have something in his house, they bring it and we sit together, just we drink coffee, maybe whatever. But yeah, there's a social life, there's a lot of things going on, especially when the problem outside it's happened. In your home, you don't feel lonely because all the people in the same place, they meet together and they start to make some kind of conversation or being together because they would like to feel not lonely in this situation.
And coming from abroad, coming here, and you're talking about challenges, absolutely undecipherable people. I mean, I was so miserable when if I hadn't had my brothers and sisters, I think I would have been a severely depressed child. Going to school was the most miserable experience. I, in fact, eventually refused to go to school.
By living in Lewis, a town with a very artistic community, a very intelligent and people open to difference. I've never been stopped and searched. You know, I haven't been whisked into a cell, but that doesn't mean that reality is the universal reality for people living in Brixton or living in Manchester, in the city, Birmingham, Bristol. So I'm not deceived by that.
I moved to England to study because I thought media will be a good idea for me to put it in a higher level. So I applied for media production with film and TV production and documentary making, the whole of it. So I did my degree in Luton University, which is Bedfordshire at the moment. And the first time I experienced stop and search it was late night coming home from the uni, working late. And I didn't have much. I logged in and I was running or something, wearing his simple clothes. And these two policemen came behind me and they say, stop. And I stopped. I thought, that's weird. Never happened to me. And they said, we have to stop and search you because we saw you running or we saw somebody, I can't even remember. That was 1993, and I was so surprised. And I see to an Asian policeman there who looks like similar to me with the same complication of color, and there's another white European Englishman, and I was like, how could you let him do this? You could have said something, or you see me going easy, and it's just randomly picked me up from others. Others were walking by and they had to come to me, and that was it. The system needs some kind of adjustment to me. So I respected the system, never been to the police station, never been to anywhere, but I had this always in me fear of making mistakes or making involvement. So very careful when this kind of thing hit you in the beginning, is stops you from walking faster, doing things. You can't even afford to make mistakes. So that was my worst nightmare. So they did what they have to do, write everything, my name and all that. And they searched me. Obviously, I had nothing except a pen in my pocket. And obviously, they didn't even apologize for what they did. And they let me go home. That was the worst experience I had.
And we're the first Black family in our village, so there's a lot of discrimination and racism from maybe locals who weren't used to seeing other people of color. So that's quite kind of difficult to process and deal with. And it has affected me, and I'm sure it's affected my siblings as well, because it does stay with you for life, like having kind of early exposure to discrimination and like realizing that you're not the same as other people and being different.
When I went to the new school that I went to, where there was only me and one other African girl, I think she was mixed race, African and white, Nigerian she might have been, in fact. But the whole school otherwise was white. So my parents set out to, the way that we did in Nigeria, the squash and the cakes and the sandwiches, and invited the whole class. And as the time came, and nobody came to this birthday. The only girl who came to the birthday was the Nigerian girl, and I still remember her name. Her name was Doyin, and she came, and she was the only child in the entire class who came to my birthday. And that had really taught me something about where I had landed. But over time, you realize that it's really important information. It's a rich learning, both about what you then have to navigate.
How far do I let someone get away with saying something they shouldn't really be saying on the street, or, you know, if they're in my vicinity or something like that. And I have an example where I was at a anniversary party of my friend's family. And there was a gentleman there who, you know, I won't give you too much context, but he used the word, and he said it in front of me, and I was having a conversation with him, and I said, well, we don't really say that sort of thing anymore. And, you know, everyone around us went a bit quiet, and it was a bit awkward. He's like, well, what do you say? Well, loads of different options, and I reeled them all off for him. But he seemed perplexed, and, you know, it's just, there have been incidents like that. But I have to say, you know, little things like that, well, that's not really little. I mean, this guy was actually a headmaster in a school in Croydon, which is very surprising that he'd use a term like that in such a place like Croydon, right? So that was a bit of a surprise. But I think, you know, all you can do is stand your ground and say, we don't really sort of say this thing anymore.
The really main challenge is not even the barriers you face out there, but the way that racism, sexism, homophobia also, but the way racism slices you inside, because you want to make it in the world. So you have to learn the habits, you have to lose your accent, you have to speak this accent that you're saying, oh, I wish I could speak like that. I had to learn to speak like this because it's the voice of authority in this society. It's not my natural voice. This is what I have to learn.
This stereotype of the immigrant in the inner city living with an animosity and a rage, I think it pleases some liberals, as if such a creature is a real, genuine black man. As a poet, a spectrum of emotions is your entitlement. You can write a love poem for your wife, watching your daughter play, excited by seeing a hydrangea, excited by Bonfire Night, or just watching Brixton Life, seeing a vegetable from the Caribbean. The world is your oyster.
A lot of maybe the diaspora community here, especially people who've come here young, maybe they go through a phase where they have some sort of identity crisis because especially if you grow up outside of maybe the bigger cities like London, Manchester, Birmingham, where you don't have much of a Somali community, it is hard to stay connected because a lot of people are so focused on trying to integrate into UK society and be accepted by people that sometimes they lose a part of themselves. But I think, you know, as I've grown older and as my siblings have grown up as well, we've realized the importance of maintaining that connection. And my parents were also quite key in ensuring we're always, you know, aware of like the history of Somalia and what Somalia is like as a country. Because for us, we didn't really get a chance to go back because of the civil war. At the same time, we shouldn't shame people who are unable to maintain that connection, because there's so many young people who don't have the means to learn the language or be connected to their culture because there's no one around to teach them. So I think it's hard to get the balance right, but maybe it's a journey, but it's never too late to learn.
I would love to find a place they support us with the rules more to make everything clear, because every day maybe I have a lot of questions. In the end, I'm moving from different country to another, so I will be very lost about what I have to do. How can I do that? If I receive a post, simply the post for me, it was a very big problem because I don't understand. I have to change my address, the things, the bank things, as like this kind of small details that for me it was big problems. So I really need a place they explain the basic life for the people who's coming and moving to the UK, because it's really we're going through a lot of people who's victim us and trying to put us in problem, or maybe they told us about things illegal because we don't know how to make the legal ones, so we think this is the right way. So sometimes you're going through things very hard because there's no place they support you how to know everything clearly with that was in the UK.
I am, whether I like it or not, a role model to other people in one way or another. And that my, whatever I've achieved in life, whether it's being one of the first women of colour who went to my college at Cambridge, whether it's running my own business and teaching equality, diversity and inclusion, which is what I've been doing for 30 years, or whether it's raising a family against all kinds of historical and contemporary odds, that role modelling actually, just by being who I am and trying to do the things I do, is making a contribution to this society.
So as a young Black in this society, it's important to have role models who are Black. If you like athletics, okay, you admire Usain Bolt. But you've got to get out of that black and white box. Your heritage is this. So as a young Black, bright teenager who loves science, part of your role models could be Einstein.
And I'm not saying we have to bash children over the head with racism, but we have to educate them about the truth. And there is a legacy that this country has. It doesn't need to be ashamed, but it needs to be open-minded. And I think in Joni that has happened in terms of children now being taught about the war, being taught about the atrocities. And those same atrocities have happened in the name of this country. And they need to be taught and spoken about. So culture alone isn't going to do it.
So all my life, my mother worked very hard. Some of my early memories of her are her staying up late, working her education. Sometimes she'd be late picking us up from school, me and my brother, because she would have so much work and meetings on. And, she worked so hard that sometimes make her actually sick as well. And she's an amazing example of the sort of antithesis of what, Nigel Farage and all those sort of guys are talking about, where, she's come to this country after fighting in a war for her country's liberation, got her education, and then, started a business whilst raising 2 kids by herself. So started a business, ran a business, and got the business to where it is now. Over 25 years now, I think Fandu has been around. So she is, one of the best, if not the best, example of, what people do when they come over here. It's not that pervasive myth where what we were talking about, where, Black and brown people, ethnic minorities, whatever you want to call them, come here, take their benefits and, do nothing. That's not the case. It's not been my experience whatsoever.
So I try to avoid a simple black and white, simplistic division. I think we learn a lot more if we start thinking of linear and non-linear. You've got a linear mind, and that mind can be white or black. You can have a very black, conservative, linear mind. It doesn't mean because you're black, you're automatically radical. No, you can be a very, very straight, middle class with blinkered perceptions, black, who think in a linear way. So as a young black writer, as a young black artist, I advise you to follow the non-linear path.
London was a big draw for me because of the diversity of multicultural community, but also because I wanted to find out who I was, my identity, my sexuality. Where did that put me? I wanted to see people who were the same as me, or who I could identify with other women.
My family, to kind of grow up outside of Somalia, it has been a lot of kind of barriers and challenges trying to adapt and moving from one country to the other, trying to get used to the language. It's been a lot of kind of challenges there.
I wanted to be an artist. So I wanted to be in the arts. I wanted to be creative. And I had to fight for that. But this country allowed me to fight for that and gave me the space and the time and the education system to do it.
Being able to get an education and being able to see my siblings access kind of opportunities and paving the way for them, and seeing girls in the Somali community also do the same. So that's been quite a positive, just seeing a whole generation of women try to become like independent and continue their education instead of where culture would have maybe expected women to get rid of, like, instead of pursuing education, just focus on marriage and having kids. As we're seeing a whole kind of generation of really strong Somali women and prioritizing themselves, really.
Recently, I started to enjoying the life in Brighton. I started to walking in the seafront. I started to running, explore my neighborhood after a long time. There's a nice atmosphere there. It's a fun place to live.
The good thing about coming here to Europe is you gain knowledge and you have an opportunity to grow yourself with this all technical advancement they have here in Europe, which there is some in limitedness in back home in Africa, but in here you can gain and learn and all of that. So that's what I did as much as I can, and that is a bonus that you get out of this unbalanced and unacceptable race-related push and shove kind of life here. That helps, and when you balance it, it's the winning, the upper hand is much better. And then you can do your life and lead your life in a good way. If you remember to give back to your community, and that will give you also another strength to survive here openly and happily.
In terms of change, I'm really young. I'm 24, so I keep thinking about it. I think about how living in the UK, how I can contribute to how the world works and what I want to be, what I want to see changed. I mean, to be honest, given the state of how things are right now, sometimes I am scared that nothing will change. Like, there's nothing I can do to change the way things are. But how I convince myself to keep going is just that if I do things bit by bit, slowly, in whatever capacity I can, that can bring out a small change, which might take action in 10 or 20 years.
I am of mixed race, so I don't have a culture, a language. I've made my own sort of culture, maybe through my own family, and that's where I am truly at home. And I have links to Germany as well. I have family in Germany, and there are things about the German culture that's really lovely.
Right now, I'm reading a book by this freedom fighter who fought for the freedom of India when we were colonized. His name is Bhagat Singh. So he speaks a lot about universal brotherhood and how that's important. And he says that only when all of us abandon our social, political biases against each other can we really work towards a universal brotherhood. And that just means that we treat all people equally, and we look at our world as one, in the sense of I relate to somebody from the UK as much as I relate to somebody from India. And I mean, I understand that we're all split up in nations, and that's because we relate to some people, some cultures more. But I think that's where I want to see us going in the long run, of being fraternal to each other, no matter where we come from, no matter what color, caste, community, gender we are from. So I think that's what I want.
Working with migrant communities, whether they're Middle Eastern, Africans, from any walk of life, and encouraging them using their own language and culture. It fills me with pride when I see them on the high street that some them have set up their own business, their own coffee shops, their own Thai restaurants, Italian restaurants, and also become nurses, dentist nurses. All these people, everywhere I go, I meet them. And I think, to me, that is social justice.
Sharing our stories is very important. I mean, diversity and difference is what makes us stick. And sameness is boring,
I've been brought up as a minority, so I don't want to be part of the majority. That's the way I deal with that. I'm quite happy to be a minority because I'm confident in my minoritism.
Our similarity should be celebrated, community celebrated, community, different cultures should be celebrated more than the division.
The more people integrate, the more people intermarry, the more educated people get, really, the better things get for everybody else.
There's always been something binding us, which is a kind of a very deep belief in the fundamental equality of people. And a very deep belief that ultimately we all have to learn to get along with each other. So this was 2013, when Anuja and I decided to have our civil partnership here in Lewes, and we did the registration in the town hall. We came out of the registration office to the top of the stairs, and the next party that was coming in for a wedding registration was standing at the bottom. And you could see them then all start to talk to each other, but like in a really nice way. It wasn't like, oh my God, something terrible's happening here. People were like really, oh, right, here are these two women. And I imagined then that there's never been a time where two women in saris have got married at Lewes. Imagine there are probably relatively few places in the world where that realization would have brought that reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.